It's the second day of the Amazing Readathon and I already feel like I'm falling behind. The first prompt, along with the board game for the sightseeing prompts, dropped yesterday, and our first book has to be a booktuber recommendation. So I'll be reading Princeweaver by Elian J. Morgan, which was highly recommended by Mare at Lady Mare Reads. I'll link to her channel along with Bree at Four Paws in a Book, who is the host of the readathon, and the link to the kickoff sprints, all of that in the description if you want it. I think part of the reason that I feel like I'm falling behind is comparison. I've been in the Discord. I loved that last year and I really hope that I'm going to enjoy spending time there this round. It is a busy Discord, but I really enjoyed that. However, on this first couple of days, seeing everyone that is finishing their first book, finishing their first sightseeing book, finishing more than that is making me feel a little like I'm not quite living up to where I should be. And I do know that this readathon is hectic and crazy, and I'm fairly certain I've always felt in the first couple of days like I can't do this. And by the end of the month, my book count is amazing and I've found great books, and it really motivates me to pick up books I wouldn't have read otherwise because they don't fit a prompt, and to really make progress on my TBR because I'm reading as much as I can to hit as many prompts and as many points as I can. So I do always come out of it having had a great reading month. The beginning is just a bit scary, maybe. I think that's not been helped this time by the fact that Princeweaver I only have as a hardback. I have been properly obsessed for the past month or so with getting really back into Pokemon Go. I haven't played it in about 5 years and I'm completely hooked. So I've been, every free moment I have, I am out clocking up egg hatching miles and catching Pokemon and working on everything that I've missed in the game while I've been away. So that's great for audiobooks. It's fantastic. My audiobooks are doing brilliantly, but I don't have this one on audiobook. And so this one coming up first has probably not helped with that feeling like I'm behind aspect. If it had been an audiobook, I maybe wouldn't be quite as unsure. However, for the sightseeing rolls, I have rolled my first one and I've managed to find a book that I can read when I'm out and about. So once I submit this hardback, I will probably feel like I've jumped ahead because I do think I'll be clocking a couple of sightseeing books by the time this one is done. It's just gonna happen in bits and starts rather than smoothly or linearly. It is what it is. I would really like to find a way to work Pokemon Go into one of my reading vlogs. I'm just not sure how to do that. So if you have any ideas, please let me know. Getting back to Princeweaver though, Mare had really sold this with it is an arranged marriage, it's a queer arranged marriage, there's hidden sorcery, there's a mystery going on. Honestly, it's all I needed to know. And I picked it up almost knowing nothing about it. So I've been really pleasantly surprised to find that it is also in kind of fantasy Wales, which I wasn't expecting. This is very much a world inspired by England and Wales and the kind of English cultural occupation of Wales. So we have one country where the native inhabitants are being ruled over by a conquering foreign nearby force. And our protagonist, Mailer, is a apothecary with secret hidden magic. In the first chapter, like it all kicks off fairly quickly. In the first chapter, he and his adopted brother get into a fight with one of the royal guards, and to protect his brother from prosecution, Mailer agrees to the prince who has recently come to rule over the land in his father's stead. He agrees to his proposal of marriage, which happens on the spot. I'm around about page 130, I think now, which puts me about a third in. And so far we have spent a lot of time with the court. There's not just struggling to get a handle on all of the people that there are, and there are a lot of names kicking about, but also to survive or to carve a place for himself in with these people who are not only, you know, they're royalty and nobility and he is just a peasant, but also they're all from this other culture that very much looks down upon him and his. I really like what Morgan is doing here. As I said, we've not had a whole lot of plot, although we have just ended on a very suspicious sorcery looking death, and Mailer is now the guard's prime suspect. He and Prince Ossian are going to do a bit of investigating on their own to try and find other suspects and clear his name. What I'm really enjoying though is the way Morgan is using this story to discuss parallels between this magical world and England and Wales. We have one culture that views itself as rational, as enlightened, as having a right to rule over a culture that it sees as mystical and backwards and a little bit airy-fairy, a little bit savage. And it's doing that not just by force of arms, but also by suppression of culture and banning of language itself. It's very much doing that. How do you assimilate a people into a bigger culture, into a occupying culture? And that has been really interesting. There's some interesting commentary there. I can see this becoming a really juicy romantic relationship as they get to know each other better, but it does feel very slow burn, which I really like. I think that investigating the mystery together, getting involved in some danger is definitely going to help raise those stakes and help that romance blossom. Once it did not matter that our gods had different names, our stories different heroes. They were the same gods and the same stories shared by the same fire. Now they banish our gods and forbid our stories. A land does not die in a day, but through the slow exsanguination of its soul. That's one of the little excerpts, fictional excerpts from fictional sources that are included at the start of every chapter of Princeweaver, and I think it gives a really good idea of what the book is about. It's, yes, the romance, and I did love the romance. It was very slow burn, very obliviousness to lovers, which I really enjoyed. I also really liked the mystery. I thought it was good. The murders and crimes that were happening were suitably horrific. Not quite into that horror territory, but there's definitely an element of them being a little bit darker. And then I did think that Morgan gave us a fair number of suspects with, if not overly clear motives or potential motives, suspicious enough behaviour that I was kept guessing about the true perpetrator until not long before the big reveal, which is where I think it should come in a mystery. I'm really glad that all of those elements worked for me because that's what I wanted from the book. It was a fantasy mystery with an arranged marriage. That's why I was here, and it was perfect. What I wasn't expecting to get from the book was so much of that nuance between fantasy England and fantasy Wales. I wasn't expecting to get so much discussion of how culture and language can either be used to subjugate or to give a people identity. I thought it was a really interesting take. It was definitely using a lot of historical research to build this fantasy dynamic between the countries. Thought it was very well done. I really liked the way we were put on to the wrong foot, if that makes sense, as we got towards the end, because maybe not obviously, but I feel that it feels obvious to me, both in the context of the real world and in the context of the book, that you should be on the side of the people whose language has been banned, their culture has been banned, and it is being used to subjugate them to a more rational military power. But towards the end of the book, as we saw the murders start to happen, we start to see some of the characters we've come to care about being targeted. You were forced to weigh up the moral implications from both sides. You could see throughout the book it being built up, how unfairly his culture is treated, how unfairly his people are treated, but at the same time he's also thrown by the, but you can't kill people to achieve your goals. And it's a really complicated moral standpoint, and I thought Morgan did a really good job of doing the push and pull, of kind of playing both sides of it, hiding in those morally greys rather than condemning one side or the other too harshly. The end, what is, I need the next book now, but I'm really glad that I finished it. I wasn't sure if I would. We were getting quite time crunchy, I don't know why my reading's been so much slower this month than I expected it to be. I also don't know if it is slower or if this is just a comparison thing where I'm seeing other people finishing books so quickly and I'm worried that I'm not keeping up. I don't know whether it would be worth looking at my story graph for this time last year to see if I was reading faster. I suspect I was, but I also was reading almost purely for points, whereas this year I'm wanting to read the things I want to read and I want to read them to enjoy them rather than purely to get through the points and to contribute. So my reading style is a little different this month, but it does feel slower. I did finish it just in time though for the next prompt to drop, which was a book that you either borrowed or don't own in some way. And for that one, I went straight to my local library. I could have read anything from the library, and I don't know why I picked one that was going to be a little bit more tricky for me. I should have picked something really simple, but I chose A Memory Called Empire because I had seen it around. I'm vaguely aware of really great reviews for it, and it does sound like something that I would enjoy, just if it was a little bit different. If this was a fantasy mystery, it would be absolutely up my street. I'd probably already have read it, but it's science fiction and I do struggle with science fiction. So I'm currently sitting around page 50 and I'm not completely committed to, I've not completely decided. I think I'm probably gonna give it to page 100. That would be around about the quarter mark, which seems fair, and then I'll decide how I'm getting on. In this, we're following Ambassador Mahit. She is recently been promoted to this role and sent from what is considered a backwater space station to take on the role of ambassador at the very heart of the Empire. Now, to do that, or to help her do that, she has a neural implant which gives her a version of the previous ambassador. So he's there to try and smooth the way for her, to try and give her hints and tips and help her fit in when she arrives. But she and this neural net haven't had much time to get to know each other because she has been so suddenly summoned. And it turns out that the reason for that very urgent summoning is that her predecessor is dead. She of course is told that this was a completely unforeseeable accident, it's an allergic reaction, but Mahit almost immediately suspects that something bigger is at play, some kind of either politics or personal grievance, and that he has been murdered, and she wonders if she might be next. Already there are a lot of interesting things going on with this book, and I do find it funny that it comes, for me, right after Princeweaver, because both books are really using language in different but really important ways. Whereas in Princeweaver it was language and folklore and story, A Memory Called Empire is using language sometimes as a way of othering, of showing how Mahit doesn't quite fit into the echelons of this new world, even though she's highly educated and she's passionate about the culture she's going into. I expect that we're going to be doing a lot with language as the book goes on. If this doesn't work for me though, I do have a backup. This is Wicked, the graphic novel, part 1. If I don't read it now, I can move it into the face-off week or onto one of the sightseeing prompts if I need something quick, but it would be a backup. I am hoping though that Memory Called Empire is going to be really successful for me once I get into it. I might see if the library also has the audiobook to maybe help with some of the names and titles. I'll let you know how I get on. I made it to the end of A Memory Called Empire. I didn't finish it before leg 3 dropped, which I could be wrong, but I don't think I've ever, in the 3 years I've done the Amazing Readathon, I don't think I've ever fallen behind in a leg. I mean, sometimes it's been by the skin of my teeth, sometimes I've switched books at the last minute to pick something shorter, but I think this might be the first time I've not been able to keep up. But it was by a very small amount and it was worth finishing. I ended up really enjoying this book a lot more than I thought I would. I really liked the political intrigue that Mahit gets caught up in. I liked that there were lots of different factions, and to be honest, that towards the end a lot of the plot lines or in relation to those different factions that she was only briefly kind of glancing at or touching upon didn't feel completely resolved. I felt like this was a world that is going on off page. It's expanding out past what we see from our protagonist, and it just added a layer of immersion and richness to the story and to the world that I really appreciated. In terms of it being a murder mystery, I don't know how I don't know that I would agree with that. We do obviously have Iskander's death. We do see Mahit investigating a little bit what has happened to him, and we do get an answer to that. I don't think it's important enough in relation to some of the other intrigues that are going on to count it as a murder mystery. I also think we find out the solution to that relatively early, and there are bigger questions to be asked. I'm not always completely entirely sure where that line is, and it's just the vibe in my head. But for me, this felt more like a political thriller set in space than a murder mystery, but I still had a really good time. I really did like the alienness of the Texicalian society and of Mahit's. Like, they both felt alien to me as a reader. They both had their own societal, cultural, moral quirks where I could relate to some elements and not others, so both felt like alien races. Even though everyone's human in this, the whole point is that their cultures are so divergent, being from such different places. This is a big city at the heart of Empire. The city is the world is the city. Whereas Mahit is from a very isolated backwater space station that doesn't seem to have a lot of the things you would get on a planet. At one point I think she talks about how her people don't have words for different type of birds because it's something that's irrelevant. They just have the word for bird and it kind of covers all the subcategories within that, whereas on this planet they have different types of bird, and that is something that she notices. So it gave you like a nice distinction between the type of lives these people are leading. I know that this is a duology. I don't actually know what the sequel is called. I don't know that I'll read that. I enjoyed this one, I definitely did, but it felt, or it feels, like a fairly cohesive standalone to me, and I don't know that I'm motivated enough to want to pick up a sequel. I'll probably end up reading the summary and maybe putting it on the TBR if the library has a copy. I honestly feel like this stood just fine on its own. I was intrigued. Now we are right in the middle of leg 3, so I'm gonna be trying to keep up and just read this one a little bit faster. Not racing through it and not enjoying the book, but it is a shorter book anyway, and I think a more accessible one. It's a lighter read, so hopefully that'll let me catch up. This prompt is to read a book that has a proposition in the title, so I'm gonna be, or I currently am, reading The Farm Girl's Guide, or A Farm Girl's Guide to Ruling as a Bloodthirsty Tyrant, I think might be the title, by Katy Nyquist. It is the second book in her Scandals of the Gifted series, which starts with The Holy Maiden's Guide to Getting Kidnapped. I read that one last summer and it was in my kind of just, I'm wanting to try more romantasy, but the ones that keep being hyped don't seem to be working for me. I'm going to try some things that I think I might be interested in, and it definitely worked. It was a 5-star read for me. I will see if I can find the vlog for that and I'll link it. But yeah, I loved it. We were following the holy maiden Isabel, whose magical power gave her the ability to heal kind of any sickness, any wound, but at the cost of a day of her own life. She's being used by the city and even more so by the kind of religious elites. What I loved about that book was we had such a sharp political mind in Isabel, but she used what people thought of her, this submissive holy maiden act, to get what she wanted. And then we contrasted that with Countess Donya, who was a much more obviously feminist, trouser-wearing, equal rights advocate, and you got to see those two different types of political feminist and how they came at problems with different approaches, how they worked against each other and eventually together. And there was a lot else going on. We had the Dark Lord Kane invading the city, taking Isabel hostage, but there was a kind of World Games Expo going on where the different countries are all competing for prizes of various sorts, things like who gets to rule a country, down to more petty cash-based problems. So I really enjoyed the book. I thought it was a really fun romantasy. It did what I like in fantasy, in political fantasy, but in a really kind of light-hearted, not taking itself too seriously type of way. In this book, we are following Bora, who is Isabel's younger sister, but they're relatively separate characters, and honestly, I'm kind of getting the sense that you could read this as a standalone or as the first book in the series. But Bora has come to the city. Isabel's gone. Isabel's left the city with the Dark Lord from the last book. Bora has arrived in the city because she has to register for some training. Her gift has late bloomed. Her gift, which apparently is to bounce when dropped from very, very high heights. So incredibly useful in day-to-day life. She comes to the city. She almost immediately bumps into an ex. They have a bit of an argument. His new conquest turns up, and she is the famed Blood Duchess who has brought the new to-be crowned princess to the city and is working as her regent. She immediately orders Bora's death for insulting her, and Bora gets thrown into the cells. When she makes an escape attempt, she finds that through magical means, she and the Duchess are body swapped, and so she wakes up in the body of this Blood Countess. And obviously she immediately thinks, I don't want to do this, but for various political reasons that Donya puts to her once she finds out what's happening, for both Bora's own sake, for the princess's sake, for the city as a whole, because there are now various external forces threatening it, she just needs to stay in the role and play the part and buy everyone some time. So I'm currently sitting at about, I think, a quarter of the way through it. At this stage, I don't think I'm gonna end up loving it as much as I liked the first book. I just don't know that it's doing as much. I am enjoying Bora as a character. There is a lot of discussion and, you know, looking at internalized fat phobia. There is a lot of discussion of body image issues, body dysmorphia. We have a gender fluid love interest, I think, coming into the scene, and it'll be interesting to see how and if that idea of body dysmorphia from two different viewpoints fit together or don't fit together. We'll wait and see. So having gotten to the end of the book, I do think I stand by my kind of midway thoughts. I didn't love this one the way I loved The Holy Maiden's Guide to Getting Kidnapped, but I did enjoy it. It's very much a political fantasy, but one that doesn't take itself too seriously, one that is happy to play with overpowered characters and get out of jail free cards, but is still trying to make some really interesting kind of social commentary, as well as those body image issues. We were also having a little bit of abusive or coercive relationships and maybe the gaslighting that can happen in those. We had the idea of the political elites and the working classes maybe suffering as political elites don't have to pay for things. It had a nice twist on that. When Bora looked into it, there were some characters who would make the argument of, I don't want to pay the crown this tax money. And it wasn't because necessarily they didn't want to pay taxes because they were keeping that money. It was that they wanted to spend that money on their own locals, their own people, the infrastructure they needed that they felt the crown would mismanage. And in this world, we have just had a king that did massively mismanagement, so not black and white analysis look at things, mixed in with all of the super magical powers and body swaps and gifts, which are such a fun part of the series. I was a little bit thrown. I think the entire book I had been expecting a love triangle based on the cover, and I really don't think we get that. There are a couple of characters in the book that show an interest in Bora, I guess. The amount of weight that the back copy gave to that crush on Donya is maybe what made me think there would be a love triangle, and it's not how it turns out. So the front cover I think was a little bit deceptive, just for what I was expecting, but I'm happy with what we got. I think the cover, I maybe thought there was going to be either a love triangle or maybe some polyamory, and that doesn't happen in the book, so just expectations there. But I did have a good time with it. I really liked Bora as a character. I liked that we saw her grow. I think she's very different to Isabel in the first book. Isabel has that confidence, and shrewdness, and even though she's making choices within the framework of what's available to her, you do very much get the sense that if that framework wasn't there, she would just be like on top of it and making decisions left, right and centre, whereas Bora is almost afraid of her own shadow. She's very much this fat woman who has made herself smaller to not be intrusive, to not be a problem. And I thought that was really good, nice representation, seeing that, because it's so true. And I like that her struggles to embrace her weight or accept her weight were complex. Being swapped into a new body, there's a whole raft that's all coming up. The Countess is still fat. Actually, she's heavier than Bora is. We get Bora discussing how she's always had problems with her weight. There is some talk of bulimia and throwing up in it, so in case those are triggers for you. Despite all that, and a lot of it coming from jibes from her mother, jibes from her ex, her own insecurities, she has grown to accept her body. Except she kind of hasn't, but she tells herself she has, but from the way it's written in other moments, you get the feeling that that's maybe just something she's told herself and she hasn't really. And then she has the thing of now she's in this new body that she doesn't like either, but because it's not her body, she doesn't even feel the need to be kind to it. It was a really nice kind of nuanced look at what it's like to exist in a fat body, whether it's yours or not, I guess. The third book I already have an arc of, something Necromancer's Guide, something with Necromancer. I wonder if it might be Bora and Isabel's younger brother, just giving one to each of the family. This one was good. It had a really dramatic, action-packed ending, and even if I didn't love it as much as the last book, it's still definitely a 4-star read. For the prompt of to read a book with a holiday in it, I originally on my TBR had 10 Things That Never Happened by Alexis Hall. And though I love that book and it's been 5 stars as a reread for me, I decided to change it up and actually go with the book I had as a backup. So I read Night Watch by Terry Pratchett. This in particular, oh, the cover's not great. This one in particular is the Penguin Modern Classics edition. This was the book from the entire 40 odd Discworld series that they decided to publish as a Penguin Classic. This particular edition has a couple of introductions, one from Terry Pratchett's personal secretary and one from a couple of his friends. And then at the back of the book we have notes that give you more information on some of the references, some of the allusions that he's making in the story. I didn't film any updates while I was reading this one because it is a multiple times reread. I knew exactly how I was going to feel about it, and I did. But I thought I would come on and talk about this particular edition, which gives us quite a lot of insight into Terry Pratchett as a person, as a writer, and into his different inspirations and where he's pulled references from and worked them into the story. I think it's worth noting that the editors here have pointed out that they think, and Pratchett always intended, that each Discworld book should, by and large, be able to be read as a standalone. This is something like the 30th book in the Discworld series, and it does come roughly in the middle of the City Watch arc, but I do think they're right and it can be read as a standalone without really needing any context from the series at large. Everything feels very self-contained in this one. When people ask where to start Discworld, I often say book 8, Guards, which is the first book in the City Watch series. But if you wanted to, this would be an equally good place to try and then jump back to those other books. Now, is this the best book to have been picked to be the Penguin Modern Classic? I think there's a fairly good case for it. Personally, one of my favourite books is Witches Abroad. I love what that does with fairy tales and the way it analyses them and subverts the tropes, but I know it's maybe not for everyone. I do think another 2 good contenders for this honour would have been Jingo, which is another book in the City Watch series, or Monstrous Regiment, which is actually a standalone. Both those books are looking at war, the politics of conflict and its ramifications, with Jingo looking maybe more directly at racism and the conflict there, and Monstrous Regiment looking more at what it's like to be drafted and gender roles and gender issues. I suppose I can see that Monstrous Regiment maybe wouldn't have been picked because what I feel is truly brilliantly done and really interesting about it is that gender analysis, and I'm sure that a book that's largely about gender and women would have been considered to be not as universally interesting as something with a male protagonist. However, I do think Nightwatch is on par with both of those, and it's one of Pratchett's most cohesive stories and definitely deserves to be the book that was picked to become a classic. I do think it's a little bit more serious than some of the other books in the Discworld series. As a whole, Discworld does get more serious and less satire-y as we go on, but Nightwatch is particularly dark, and I do feel like it marks a turning point for Vimes as a character. And that's not to say that these books aren't still funny. They are. Personally, one of my favourite lines comes right on page 12 after the villain of the week that we are following in this book has killed one of Vimes's officers. Was Strong in the Arm married, he asked. No sir, lived in New Cobblers with his parents. Parents, thought Vimes. That made it worse. Anyone been to tell them, he asked. And don't say it was Nobby. We don't want a repeat of that bet you $1 you're the widow Jackson nonsense. That line gives you such a good picture of Nobby as a character and of Vimes and Carrot, the relationship they have and who they are as people too. It's not as punny or as laugh out loud funny as the comedy he was trying to do in some of those earlier books. It has a more world-weary humour to it that I think goes through this entire book. There's a lot more action and a lot more socio-economic analysis in this book than we get in some of the early books in the Discworld series. We're following Commander Sam Vimes, who has, over the course of the City Watch books, worked his way to the very top of the top, kind of against his wishes. He is like a copper through and through. He's dour and he's very dark-humoured, but he is dedicated to doing what he thinks is right. He is chasing a killer called Carcer, and through a magical accident, they both end up falling backwards through time to a point where Vimes was 20 years old and just starting out. He steps into the shoes of the man who mentored him, Sergeant John Keel, and we get to see the city of Ankh-Morpork during this time, while Vimes tries to one-up Carcer, but also tries to get back to his wife and his family and his own time. In this historic Ankh-Morpork, Pratchett is talking a lot about politics and corruption, police brutality, rebellion and uprising. We also, interestingly enough for our current situation, take a look at this idea of the people and how people in power will use the notion of what the people want when oftentimes no one knows who those people are. No one wants those things. But we have this mythologized version of the people and what they want, and the upper class or the ruling class often use that in order to pull everyone along with them, when really that might only be a tiny subsection that are just being used so that those with more power can manipulate things to their own advantage. In the notes we talk about the glorious People's Republic of Treaclemine Road. The plot is a bit of a mixture of Les Mis, The Terminator and some real world revolutions and riots. In particular, we are taking inspiration from the Battle of Cable Street, which in the notes is explained as the Battle of Cable Street, 4th October 1936, was a major instance of civil disobedience and insurrection on the streets of 20th century London, and a major moment in the history of British anti-fascist activism. Hundreds of thousands of protesters, spearheaded by communist and Jewish activists, demonstrated against a march by Oswald Mosley's British Union of Fascists, who had significant police protection. The demonstration spilled over into violence and running street battles, during which Cable Street in the east end of the city was barricaded, as is its Ankh-Morpork namesake. So Pratchett is pulling from history. There are other kind of revolutions, there are other uprisings mentioned in here. This is one of his very honest, very upfront political social point books. I also caught a reference to spinning blue lights, travelling through time, clearly a reference to the TARDIS, which I thought, considering the Amazing Readathon at the moment has a Doctor Who theme, was just a really nice little touch. I knew that I was going to like this book, but I did think this particular edition was excellent. I learned a few things I didn't know from the notes at the back. I already knew quite a lot about Terry Pratchett because I like him so much as a writer, but I learned some new things. I think there would be lots here to learn, and I think if you're not a Pratchett fan and you want to try the Discworld, this one does stand on its own, and if you were gonna read Nightwatch, I would get this edition because it will also explain a lot of the really clever references to rhyming slang, to historical events, to pop culture that Pratchett manages to wiggle in lots of just little passing lines and phrases. So that catches me up with where we are in the readathon. I'm now, you know, keeping pace as we go into the face-off weekend. I was thinking about vlogging the face-off weekend, but I have a couple of things on. I will be trying to read as many short books as possible, but I just don't think I want to add in the time it would take to continually jump back to camera. Instead, what I'm going to do is keep all of the graphic novels and short stories and everything that I pick up for face-off weekend and for the various sightseeing prompts this month, and I'll put out a vlog at some point, maybe next month, of those short reads and graphic novels. Graphic novels aren't something I typically pick up a lot, so I think it would be a good idea to put them all into one vlog together and give you my thoughts as someone who doesn't really know what they're talking about. I will though have another vlog coming out probably at the end of the month or just the very start of July, which will cover the next 4 legs of the Amazing Readathon. I really hope that I will see you for those. If you're taking part in the Amazing Readathon, let me know what team you're on. Let me know how you are doing with the readathon, whether you're keeping up, whether your books so far have been successes. And if you're not doing the readathon, either let me know about the books that I've read in this one, let me know your thoughts on them, or just tell me what you have been reading this month. If you don't have anything at all you want to say, but you do want to show you were here, then leave me some kind of transport related emoji. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope that I'll see you in future videos. Goodbye.